couple of weeks ago, one of my community members had a significantly important and very practical question that she asked in our group coaching, and that was how to downsize and move your parents with dementia. And it was a tremendously valuable coaching call where the whole community came around the member and came up with wonderful strategies that you can utilize. And so today's episode, we are going to unpack how you can help your parents with dementia downsize and move using 5-step process. So I'm excited that you're here and listen to today's episode. Have you recently found out someone you love has dementia? Struggling to wrap your head around how to be a Christian caregiver? Searching for answers by joining countless Facebook groups but find them toxic? Learning how to cope with dementia feels difficult, but learning a Christian caregiving worldview can be easy. Hey, brother and sister in Christ, I'm Lizette, occupational therapist, pastor's wife turned dementia coach, and a daughter of dementia. In this podcast, you will learn the truth that the way to make dementia care easy is your faith. Knowing that a loving God has decreed this hard providence in your life makes all the difference. Here you will gain skills. You will be challenged by what God says in His Word about caregiving, and you will learn exactly what dementia is and is not. Find clarity and certainty from God's Word so you have perseverance for this journey. Use science-backed solutions and biblical principles to redeem your time. Praying this blesses you as we dive into dementia from a Christian perspective. Let's glorify God despite dementia. What's up, Christian caregiver? It's Lizette, your dementia mentor, and you are listening to Dementia Caregiving for Families. It's the show where I teach Bible-believing Christians how to navigate Alzheimer's and dementia care by decreasing stress, planning ahead, and getting back your time, despite a dementia diagnosis. In today's episode 124, we're going to explore how to easily help your parent with dementia when they need to downsize and move. Now, I know without a shadow of a doubt, moving is hard. In my life, I have lost count on how many times I've actually moved. People will tell me, no, they've moved a lot. And then I'll say, well, my husband and I were traveling therapists. I was a traveling occupational therapist when we first moved to the United States. And in the span of 5 years, we lived in 14 different states. So I probably do not hold the record for the person who has moved the most. However, I have definitely moved a lot in my life. And downsizing is hard. So moving is hard and downsizing is hard. It is extremely overwhelming when you need to downsize. There are a lot of decisions you need to make. But doing them at the same time, that is even harder. So I'm going to take you back about a couple of years, a little over 2.5 years ago, when my dad got super, super sick and ended up in the hospital and then boomeranged back out of the hospital. And my sister and I were flung into being family caregivers and just all of the drama going on. And my dad was so sick that they couldn't move back home again. They needed a little bit more assistance than what they had been requiring. And so we literally moved my mom and dad into my house with a moving truck and beds and all sorts of logistics to make it occur so that they could be comfortable when they lived with us. And the intent was at that time to just kind of see what happened and then to make decisions accordingly. And so they stayed with us for 2 months, and my dad recovered well enough that they could return home. But right at that time, my husband and I needed to make decisions related to our life and how we were going to be family caregivers and help support my parents who were now needing more help. And this was also the time of the drama of the car, needing to take the driver's license away, lots of fighting, lots of arguing, lots of not good dynamics and difficulties. So we were living in that crisis mode right at that particular time. And what I remember so clearly at that time was I just could not make any more decisions. And the thought of even deciding what we needed to have for dinner was overwhelming. So I recognize now that I'm through that decision fatigue or the inability to use your mental energy effectively can significantly impact your caregiving journey. And what we ended up doing was putting everything on hold, because at that moment in time, for me to make another decision about anything else, as stupid a decision it is to keep this set of towels versus that set of towels, or what do I want to take with me, or any of those thoughts, I just couldn't make any more decisions. And this reminded me of John 21, verse 18 and following, where Jesus says to John, "Truly, truly, I tell you, when you were younger, you used to put on your belt and walk wherever you wanted. But when you grow old, you will stretch out your hands and someone else will put on your belt and bring you to where you do not want to go." And the reason I bring up that passage is because as we are the family caregivers of somebody living with dementia, or even if we're just family caregivers, we are sometimes put into the position due to the fact that their thinking processes are changing, that we are leading them to where they do not want to go. They may not want to move. They may not want to downsize. But sometimes, depending on where in our caregiving journey we are, the decisions that are best for all parties involved are to downsize and move your parents. And it can be a very challenging time in one's life when you are facing making and helping your parents make those decisions. But it's definitely something that we are likely going to face at some point or another, whether it is now because they're not safe to live alone and they need to move, or whether it's after they pass away and we need to go through the house and take what we need or want and then downsize or get rid of the rest of the things. So at some point or another in a life journey, we are going to be facing these decisions about what to keep and what to move, how to go through that. Now, as I'm learning more about myself in just being a business owner, I'm a prolific reader and I love listening to podcasts, and I very, very much enjoy learning anything and everything. And so I know a lot about dementia and dementia caregiving, but I do not know as much about other things. And so I'm running into some tools as I'm navigating this journey of entrepreneurship and learning more about myself. And one of the things that I just recently realized is that how we think and feel and do things all intersect. There's three different things. I've always known of two, right? How you think, your thinking processes, That's your intellect, your IQ, all of those kinds of things, just how we think, the mechanics of our thought. This is all of the stuff that we see changing in a dementia caregiving journey with the person we're helping, just memory and uh, processing speed, all of those kinds of things we can test. Well, there's another section, it's the affective side, the feeling side, the part where our personality is, and how we experience our emotions and those kinds of things. And we can test those. So we can test our thinking and we can test our feeling stuff. But there's a third one, and it's called conation. It's how we actually make decisions and take action. It's our volition. It's how we do things. And there's an intersection of those three that is super fascinating to me as a professional, as an OT, related to going back to South Africa. We had a theory called creative ability, and it kind of ties into this, but not exactly. But what I'm starting to realize is how we think, our thinking processes, how we feel about things are different. But then there's this middle part where we pull these things together and where we either do something or we don't do something. And it all hinges on what actions you will actually take in a given situation. Your own unique, God-given way of making decisions, of striving, of being purposeful. And it is instinctive to all of us uniquely. And what I also find fascinating, because this is a very new way of thinking for me, is that the brain and all of this is divided into three. And that made me think of God the Father, God the Son, and God the Holy Spirit. And they are all three working together for our good and for his glory, God's glory. And so it's really been interesting to me to see that the mind actually has these three parts that have to work together in order for us to be effective in our life and effective as a caregiver. And so each day when we wake up, every one of us only have a limited amount of energy. Did you know that caring for a person with dementia doesn't have to be this hard? If you are struggling and you would like to join our next free workshop, the topic of the workshop is 3 tips how to avoid challenging dementia behaviors without stress, anxiety, or burnout. I invite you to walk away with science-backed dementia caregiving skills that many professionals don't even know after attending this free workshop on Saturday. If you'd like to register, message me the word workshop on Instagram or check out the link in the show notes below. We wake up with a certain amount of bandwidth, for lack of a better word, and limited time. We are all only given 24 hours in a day. Nobody gets 25 hours. Unless you're flying and you get back an hour in your flight. But technically in your life, you get 24 hours a day, every single one of us. And every single one of us wake up with a predetermined finite amount of energy. And sometimes when we're in a caregiving journey, I think we believe that the energy, the physical energy and the thinking part, the decisions we have to make and all of those things, that's what depletes us. But I'm starting to recognize in my own life and in my own journey that is only a part of it. Sometimes it's that mental fatigue. It's that mental burnout. It's the fact that our mental energy is being used or depleted in a way that we have not recognized yet in a family caregiving journey or in a caregiving journey. And that when we go against our grain, that is when we are exhausted, overwhelmed, and burnt out. And now, how does all of this have to play in this episode on how to help your parents with dementia downsize and move? Well, this came out of a recent coaching call that we had in my community, where one of the members is getting ready to go on a trip to Utah to help her parents who have needed to move to California because the children live in California. There are four children that live in California that are willing and able to help them. And some of the conversations that came out of that coaching call, and then some of the conversations that came out of me speaking with the parents who are needing to downsize. And then my own life journey in recognizing one of the reasons my husband and I haven't actually implemented a plan yet related to my parents is because of the mental energy that it's going to cost me and him in order to facilitate a move, and we are just not ready for it. So we live in that bubble, that in between bubble, recognizing that the shoe is going to drop at some point or another, but having chosen to defray that, to put off that energy expense to the future, and deal with the crisis when it comes, because for us right now, the expanding of that mental and physical energy is just not something we have enough reserves for. So like I said, it's been super interesting to see how these things kind of all come together. But how are we going to actually physically downsize and move a parent? So here are a few things. The first thing we're going to talk about is you have to decide if the time is right. And if the time is not right, then you wait. And that kind of ties back to what I was saying, that my husband and I decided that the time is not right. The time is not right for us because we have other obligations and other things that are more important to my husband and I to be able to facilitate right now than it is to expend that limited time and resource that we have on downsizing my parents. Because if you've been in my parents' house, some of you might have been, they have a lot of beautiful things and a lot of things that need to be sorted through and decided what gets done with. And right now, the thought of doing that just exhausts me and makes me shut down. So the time is not right. And so my husband and I have decided to wait. So the first thing we have to do is decide, is the time right? And is the time right now? And if it isn't right and it's not right now, then we wait. And we wait recognizing that the decision to wait does have consequences, but out loud we say we are willing to take the consequences of the decision to wait. And if the decision to wait is not the right decision, what do we need to do? If the decision is that no, the time is right, then we need to plan, which takes us to the second point. The second point is, what do we plan? Well, we need to plan ahead. We can't just do it without putting some thought into it. We need to decide who can help. What are the natural resources, the people, those resources that we have in our lives, whether it be some friends that can help us or whether it be our siblings that can help us. Who are the people that can help? Then we need to decide the time to help, or the when. So we need to look at people's schedules. We need to get it on a calendar. I'll use my sister and I as an example. We are both super, super busy humans. My sister has a lot on her plate, is a super dynamic woman herself. And we need to be able to, if we plan to downsize, take her life and her schedule and her own unique abilities into consideration before we just decide to move. We need to decide the when based off of the who is available to help. And then we need to actually schedule enough time to do it. And we'll circle back on the time again in the last point where we're going to talk about managing expectations, because I guarantee you it is going to take you longer to do than what you actually realize. And so we need to schedule the downsizing, and we need to build in enough time to actually be able to get the task either completely done, or we have to break it into smaller subsections. So that's the second point. What needs to be planned? Now, the third part of it is how. How do we actually downsize? So there are a lot of decisions that go into downsizing. Depending on each family, you may have multiple siblings. You may have, like in our specific case, my mom and dad immigrated from South Africa with all of their South African antiques that hold a lot of emotional and cultural value to me and my sister. So we need to be able to decide, what do we keep? I have a full household of things. My sister has a full household of things. So not only do we need to decide what to keep from my mom and dad and the things that they have accumulated and kept, but based on our space limitations, I live in a 900 square foot duplex. I would have to then decide from my stuff that I've accumulated, what do I want to keep and what do I want to get rid of? So it's like a trickle down effect. So we have to start with deciding what to keep. And then we need to decide, like if you're downsizing your parents, you need to decide, what do they keep with them, right? And then what do you keep as the kid? So there's that first decision of, what do we keep? Then the second decision becomes, like my sister and I, in our specific situation, my mom and dad, if we downsize, when we downsize, they get to choose what they will continue to live with. Then my sister and I get to choose what we decide to keep. And then my children get to decide out of their grandparents' things what they would like to keep. And so there's this trickle down effect of decisions that need to be made that impact a lot of different people. And so once those decisions have been made, then we need to start to decide what is pitch worthy, what needs to be thrown away, what is just the junk in the house. I'll use my parents. I love my parents dearly, but I'll use them as an example. My dad has a chest in the living room that has paperwork from South Africa on a piece of property that they liquidated over 20 years ago. I'm like, why do we still have this? So that just needs to be thrown away. But we still need to make a decision that this information is pitch worthy, or things that people have collected that are not good quality things anymore. That's just junk that needs to go in a trash can and give and thrown away. Then we need to decide, what are we going to donate? Are there items that we want to donate out of the person's house because there's not a lot of monetary value to it? Everybody has 17 pairs of, things of towels, or 20 pillows, or all of these things that just can be donated, that are still good quality, that can go to bless another person. Then maybe we need to decide, what do we need to sell? Are there assets in the house? Like my mom and dad, they have a lot of beautiful things. It would be better for us to do an estate sale and liquidate some of those assets to be able to continue to support them. What do we sell? How are we going to sell it? Is a regular estate sale sufficient? Do we just do a yard sale? Are we going to look for an upscale type of a estate place, an auction house, those kinds of things? Or are we going to consign things? Those are some options that we have to liquidate and sell some of the stuff as we are downsizing. Note of caution, if you're super, super brave, you can try Facebook Marketplace. Facebook Marketplace takes a lot of time and effort, and you bring out some of the crazies. I have done it successfully. I have done it unsuccessfully. It used to be a better mechanism to be able to sell items without bringing out all the crazy people, but all the crazy people are on Facebook Marketplace now. And so if you do choose to go down that road, just be very discerning in how to protect yourself and not get scammed on Facebook Marketplace. And then the sixth part of the how to downsize is maybe making a decision whether or not to actually put stuff in storage. Now, I know putting things in storage can bring a huge big can of worms for a lot of people. There are two vastly different schools of thought. One school of thought is if it needs to go into a storage unit, you therefore do not need it anymore, and therefore just get rid of it because you are spending money on a storage unit just to store stuff. And so therefore bless it and release it. So that's one school of thought. There's another tempered school of thought that I would like to propose for you to consider. And this was the decision my husband and I made because we actually, when we moved from Greenwood to Greenville to help take care of my parents, we did downsize. We downsized from a 2,200 square foot house into a 900 square foot apartment, and we did move. So we actually did some of these strategies, and we decided to put some things in storage. They were things that we did not have space for in the duplex that we live in, but that we weren't quite ready to say goodbye to. A lot of my husband's tools, a lot of some things that my children made when they were little that I'm still emotionally attached to. Just things that we were not ready to get rid of, but that there really wasn't any space in this particular duplex for it to go. So I made myself a promise that we would store things for a year, but no longer. I don't think I actually ever out loud said that, but that was kind of my goal in my mind, that if we didn't need it for a year, then we could possibly live without it. What we ended up doing to make this last transition easier for us is we did go and talk to my parents who have a storage unit on their condo, and we moved some things out of their storage unit. We threw things away. We downsized just that section of their apartment in order for my husband and I to actually put some of our things that did not need to be climate controlled into that storage unit. And then we commandeered a section of a closet in their house and put some things inside that do need to be climate controlled. But there is a time and a place to decide to maybe put things in storage, but don't put them in storage without a plan. And when you're going to put things in storage, you absolutely need to have a plan and plan ahead for it. So that's the next point. Next point is how to store and why to store. So the how to store things is super easy. One of the coaching call where we were talking about this, one of the other members had a wonderful suggestion, and that was when you box things up to store, specifically things that you may or may not need in the future. She recommended taking photos of the boxes, the content of the boxes before you close them up. Label the boxes, put as much on the outside of the box so you don't have to open up the box to be able to see what's in it, and take photos of the box to remind you of what you actually packed into the box. That way, when you have to go back and sort through the stuff, you know where things are, which box things are in, and are able to locate it a lot easier. Now, why do we store things sometimes? Sometimes we put things in storage to buy us some time. Circling back on the first point where the introduction, where we were talking about mental energy. It takes a significant amount of energy to make all of these decisions quickly in, back to back to back to back to back. Specifically, if you're not wired for making those decisions in such a short period of time, or you're juggling other things. And so if you find yourself in that position where you have no choice, it's time, you cannot wait anymore, but you need a little bit more time, keep the things you need to keep, distribute the stuff to family that you need to distribute, throw things away, donate. If you cannot make any more decisions, then put everything else in storage and promise yourself no more than a year, and then revisit it to buy yourself some time. Buy yourself some time to make wise decisions and to use your energy in a more effective and a more appropriate way to be able to still honor and be able to manage and cope with all of the responsibilities that may be on you as a family caregiver. You might be working. You might still have your own kids. You might be, like me, starting a business, or all of these different things that we have in our life. And it is okay to sometimes just buy yourself some time. Time is the one resource that we cannot get back. Yes, it's not ideal to maybe spend the money on a storage unit that's easily, people can say easily, that's just money thrown away. But at the same time, I can go and get a job and make more money. I cannot go and replenish the time that I have, or the emotional energy that I have expended. So sometimes it's just a trade-off to decide to just put things in storage for a short period of time. And I would recommend no longer than a year. And then after a year, you just carve out the time to do the next step, which is go through the storage unit. So the last point I wanted to talk about this morning or today is we need to manage our expectations when we are downsizing and moving. Now, what on earth, Lizette, do you mean by managing your expectations? Well, I just want to propose to you that when you are downsizing and moving somebody from a 2,200 square foot house, it is going to take longer than a week or two. It just is. Unless you're like my husband and I, when we moved from South Dakota to Greenwood, we were blessed with a full service move where 4 people walked into our house, 4 women with all of the packing supplies. They made no decisions. They just packed our stuff up, closed the boxes. 2 men packed everything into a truck, and they moved it, right? That's the moving part. That can easily be done by getting humans, just warm bodies to complete the task. But when we're considering what we're talking about today in downsizing and moving, it's the downsizing that is going to take you longer than you expect. There are memories tied up in our physical things. There are things that my parents brought to the United States that still came out of my great grandparents' house. And they are emotionally tied to things. I might have certain emotional ties to other things. There are going to be situations that are going to require you to expend a lot of emotional bandwidth to decide what to do with these things. It's not just packing. It's that emotional side, that mental energy, that bandwidth that we're talking about. And when you have multiple family members that each have different emotional bandwidth tied to certain items, certain things, certain memories, then it's going to take a little longer to sort through all of that stuff, because I'll use my sister and I as an example. She may have an emotional attachment to one thing versus another thing. Many, many years ago, my mom has been super gracious, and we've been really blessed that my granddad, my dad's dad, bought my grandmother jewelry, and every time he bought a set of jewelry, a year or so later, he would buy her a different set that was similar, because they had two granddaughters, my sister and myself. And I'll never forget, a couple of years ago, my mom started to give away her jewelry. And she gave my sister and I something similar. They were both topaz rings. And when I opened my ring and she opened her ring, her immediate response was, "Oh, I really wanted that one." And I didn't have any emotional attachment to it. And my sister and I had a lot of conflict when we were younger, but we've really worked hard on recouping our relationship. And I just didn't have that much of an emotional attachment to that particular ring. She had another topaz ring, which was similar and not terribly different. And so I'm like, "Here, you take it." And I took the other one, and my sister wears that ring all the time. And so it's going to take longer than you think when you are downsizing and moving your parents. So you have to manage your expectations. And then you have to manage your energy. Your energy is replenishable, but your energy is going to get depleted if you're not hardwired to make all of these types of decisions rapidly. And then you're working with other people who may feel differently about the situation. So when you come into this downsizing and moving type of situation, you have to manage your expectations, because frustration, and the more I do this, the more I recognize it, our frustrations are in the gap between what is and what we want, what something is and what we think it should be. That's where that frustration comes in. So if we manage our expectations, it will be significantly easier for us to be able to navigate this journey. So today's episode was in response to a coaching call that we had recently, where one of our members of the community was talking about needing to go to Utah to downsize and help her parents move. And so these were some of the suggestions and recommendations that came out of the group. These are some of the suggestions and recommendations from my own experience. It is, everybody has to make their own decisions in the end. But I definitely know that when we go against our grain, when we're not using our unique abilities to do things, we will get overwhelmed and burnt out. And so the 6 things that we talked about real briefly again today, just as a quick little recap, is: decide if the time is right. What needs to be planned? The 6 steps in how to downsize, how to store and why to put things in storage, and then managing your own expectations. So I know that you have received tremendous value from today's episode. I want you to take action on one of these suggestions or recommendations that I've made, specifically if you are in a period where you're needing to think about downsizing and moving. This is just to get the creative juices flowing. I want you to really not stress out about this, because it is a manageable thing. I wanted to equip you with some tools today that could make this journey for you related to downsizing and moving significantly easier. And I would love to invite you, if you've not been on my free monthly workshop, I do a monthly workshop on the second Saturday each month where you can register and come to the workshop and learn how to manage, or some tips on how to manage challenging behaviors in dementia caregiving. So I really hope to see you in my next workshop. Thanks for joining me today, Success Seeker. I pour my heart and soul into this program to serve you. You can serve me by leaving a review on Apple Podcasts. And join our free Facebook group, Dementia Caregiving for Families. It's a positive and proactive space to navigate dementia caregiving together. Get practical tools and find support, but without the verbal vomit. Be a part of our community where we seek to find peace of mind and ease despite the dementia diagnosis. So join today and see you next time as our flight takes off.